Let me ask you a question. If you're over 60 and you're noticing more hair in the shower drain, thinning at the crown, or your hair just isn't growing like it used to, what if I told you the problem is not aging? In fact, there's one simple breakfast food that most people your age are not eating enough of, and that deficiency is quietly shutting down hair growth. Today, I'm going to show you what's really going on and what to add starting tomorrow morning. Many people are surprised by how quietly hair loss begins after the age of 60. It doesn't usually happen overnight. It starts with subtle changes, hair that feels finer, a scalp that becomes more visible, growth that seems slower than it used to be. Most assume this is simply aging taking its course, but in clinical practice, that explanation rarely tells the full story. In reality, hair loss at this stage of life is most often connected to long-term nutritional and metabolic changes rather than an unavoidable biological deadline. Hair follicles are not passive structures. They are highly active and require constant input from the body to remain productive. Each follicle depends on a steady supply of amino acids, minerals, vitamins, oxygen, and hormonal signals. When those supplies are interrupted, the follicle doesn't struggle, it adapts. It shortens its growth phase and enters a resting state. Over time, this adaptation shows up as thinning hair. Follicle is responding to internal conditions, not simply giving up because of age. One of the most important internal changes after 60 occurs in the digestive system. Stomach acid naturally declines and enzyme production becomes less efficient. This has a direct impact on nutrient absorption, especially minerals like zinc and iron and B vitamins that are essential for hair growth. Many people continue eating the same foods they always have, unaware that their bodies are no longer extracting nutrients as effectively. Hair follicles, which are extremely sensitive to nutrient shortages, respond early and visibly. Protein utilization is another overlooked issue. Hair is composed largely of keratin, a structural protein that depends on amino acids from the diet. As people age, protein intake often drops, meals become smaller, or digestion becomes less efficient. Even when protein is present, poor breakdown and absorption can limit its availability to tissues. Hair strands become thinner not because the follicle is damaged, but because it lacks the raw materials needed to build strong fibers. Blood sugar balance also plays a significant role. Years of high carbohydrate meals, sugary snacks, and low protein breakfasts can create repeated insulin spikes. This pattern increases inflammation and disrupts circulation. Hair follicles rely on healthy blood flow to deliver nutrients and oxygen. When blood sugar fluctuates frequently, the body shifts into a protective mode, diverting resources away from non-essential functions like hair growth. The follicle receives a clear signal to slow down, chronic low. Grade inflammation further compounds the problem. Inflammation narrows small blood vessels and reduces oxygen delivery to the scalp. This doesn't cause pain or obvious symptoms, which is why it often goes unnoticed. Over time, however, it changes the environment around the follicle. Hair grows best in a calm, well-nourished, well-oxygenated setting. When inflammation persists, that environment becomes less supportive. Stress adds another layer. Prolonged physical or emotional stress raises cortisol levels, which can interfere with hair growth cycles. Even moderate stress, when constant, can push follicles into a shedding phase. Poor sleep, lack of recovery, and ongoing tension all contribute to this process. The body interprets stress as a signal to conserve energy, and hair growth is one of the first processes to be scaled back. What often makes this frustrating is that medical tests may appear normal. Nutrient levels can fall within reference ranges while still being insufficient at the tissue level. Hair, skin, and nails reveal these gaps earlier than other systems because they are lower on the body's priority list. This does not mean the damage is permanent. It means the body has been adapting to conditions over time. When internal support improves through better digestion, steadier blood sugar, adequate protein, and reduced stress, the body often shifts back toward growth. Hair follicles are remarkably resilient when given the right environment. The process requires patience and consistency, but the underlying biology remains responsive even later in life. There is a simple food that has been part of the human diet for thousands of years, yet many people over 60 have reduced or completely removed it from their breakfast. What makes this especially important is that this food contains a unique combination of nutrients that directly support hair follicles at a time when the body needs them most. When hair begins thinning with age, the issue is rarely the scalp itself. It is the lack of specific building materials reaching the follicle, and this is where whole eggs, especially the yolk, become highly relevant. Eggs are not just a source of protein. They are one of the most complete biological foods available. The yolk, in particular, contains fat, soluble vitamins, and trace minerals that are difficult to obtain in adequate amounts from plant foods alone. These nutrients work together, not in isolation. Hair follicles depend on this synergy. When one component is missing, growth becomes inefficient, even if other nutrients are present. One of the most critical nutrients in eggs is biotin. Biotin plays a central role in keratin production, the protein that gives hair its strength and structure. As people age, biotin deficiency becomes more common, especially in those with digestive issues or long-term medication use. What makes eggs valuable is that they provide biotin in a natural, food-based form that the body recognizes and uses efficiently. This supports stronger hair strands and helps reduce excessive shedding linked to fragile hair fibers. Egg yolks are also rich in sulfur containing compounds. Sulfur is essential for forming strong disulfide bonds in keratin, which give hair its resilience and elasticity. Without enough sulfur, hair becomes brittle and prone to breakage, even if it continues to grow. This is why some people notice more hair falling out, not from the root, but breaking along the length. Eggs quietly address this structural weakness from the inside. Another often overlooked benefit of eggs is their role in supporting the scalp environment. The yolk contains vitamin A and choline, which contribute to healthy skin and cell membrane function. A healthy scalp requires balanced oil production and proper cell turnover. Too little support leads to dryness and irritation, while imbalance can interfere with follicle function. Eggs help maintain this balance without overstimulating oil production. Protein quality also matters. The protein in eggs has a high biological value, meaning it closely matches the amino acid needs of the human body. For older adults, this is especially important. Even small amounts of high quality protein can be more effective than larger portions of lower quality sources. This makes eggs a practical option for breakfast when appetite may be lower but nutrient needs remain high. Eggs also help stabilize blood sugar when eaten in the morning. A breakfast centered around refined carbohydrates can lead to insulin spikes, which increase inflammation and interfere with nutrient delivery to the scalp. Eggs provide protein and healthy fats that slow digestion and create steady energy. This calmer metabolic state supports hair follicles by reducing stress signals that push them into a resting phase. Concerns about cholesterol have caused many people to avoid egg yolks unnecessarily. For most individuals, dietary cholesterol from whole foods does not translate into harmful blood cholesterol levels. In fact, cholesterol is a building block for hormones and cell membranes, both of which are essential for hair growth. Removing egg yolks often removes valuable nutrients that the body struggles to replace. When included consistently, eggs send a signal of nutritional adequacy. They tell the body that essential raw materials are available. Hair follicles respond to this signal over time, not instantly, but steadily. Growth improves when the body senses safety and abundance. This is not about excess or extremes, but about restoring a food that supports fundamental biology. Including whole eggs at breakfast is a practical, accessible step. Prepared simply, they fit easily into daily routines and provide concentrated nutrition without complexity. Over time, this small habit can help rebuild the internal environment that allows hair follicles to function more effectively even later in life. One of the most overlooked reasons hair becomes thinner and weaker with age is not that follicles disappear, but that the biochemical switches that support hair production slowly turn down. Two nutrients play a central role in this process: biotin and sulfur. When these are present in sufficient amounts, hair follicles receive a clear signal to stay active. When they are lacking, growth quietly slows, strands weaken, and shedding becomes more noticeable over time. Biotin is often discussed in the context of hair health, but its true role is frequently misunderstood. Biotin is not a cosmetic nutrient, it is a metabolic one. It acts as a cofactor in enzymes that help the body convert food into usable energy and raw materials. Hair follicles are energy-demanding structures. They divide rapidly during the growth phase and require efficient metabolism to maintain that pace. When biotin levels are low, the follicle cannot sustain active growth even if other nutrients are present. As people age, biotin deficiency becomes more common than many realize. Reduced stomach acid, changes in gut bacteria, and long-term medication use can all interfere with biotin availability. The signs are often subtle at first. Hair may lose its shine, strands may feel finer, and growth may slow without obvious bald patches. This gradual change is easy to dismiss, yet it reflects a real metabolic slowdown at the follicle level. Sulfur works alongside biotin in a different but equally important way. Hair is built from keratin, a protein strengthened by sulfur-based bonds. These bonds give hair its structure, flexibility, and resistance to breakage. When sulfur intake is low, keratin becomes weaker. Hair may still grow, but it lacks durability. This often shows up as increased breakage, frizz, and hair that never seems to gain length despite continued growth at the root. What makes sulfur especially important is that the body cannot store it in large amounts. It must be supplied regularly through diet. As dietary patterns change with age, sulfur-rich foods are often reduced, particularly when protein intake drops or becomes inconsistent. The follicle responds by producing thinner, more fragile hair fibers that are less able to withstand daily stress. Biotin and sulfur also influence the scalp environment. Healthy follicles depend on proper cell turnover and strong structural support at the root. When these nutrients are insufficient, the base of the hair shaft weakens, making it easier for hair to shed prematurely. This does not mean the follicle is damaged beyond repair. It means the materials needed for strong anchoring are missing. Another important aspect is the relationship between these nutrients and inflammation. Low biotin status has been associated with increased inflammatory signaling in tissues. Inflammation around the follicle disrupts the growth cycle and shortens the active phase. Sulfur-containing compounds help support detoxification pathways that reduce oxidative stress. Together, they help create a calmer internal environment where hair growth can continue more efficiently. Many people look for external solutions when hair changes become noticeable. Shampoos, oils, and treatments may improve appearance temporarily, but they do not correct internal deficiencies. Hair is produced from the inside out. When biotin and sulfur intake improve, the quality of new hair gradually changes. Strands grow stronger, breakage decreases, and shedding often slows as follicles remain in the growth phase longer. The effect is not immediate, and that is important to understand. Hair grows slowly, and follicles respond to consistent signals rather than quick interventions. When the body regularly receives adequate biotin and sulfur, it begins to prioritize maintenance again over weeks and months. This steady support can shift the balance from loss towards stability. Restoring these nutrients does not require extreme measures. It requires awareness, consistency, and patience. The body has a remarkable ability to recover when it receives what it needs on a regular basis. Hair follicles, even later in life, are capable of responding when the biochemical conditions for growth are restored and maintained. Many people focus on nutrients when they think about hair loss, but hormones quietly control whether those nutrients are used for growth or diverted elsewhere. After the age of 60, hormonal balance becomes more delicate, and even small disruptions can influence hair follicles. Two hormones in particular play a major role, insulin and cortisol. When these hormones are consistently elevated or unstable, hair growth is often one of the first processes to be affected. Insulin is commonly associated with blood sugar, but its influence extends far beyond that. Every time a high carbohydrate or sugary meal is eaten, insulin rises to move glucose out of the bloodstream. When this happens occasionally, the body handles it well. Over years, however, repeated insulin spikes can create resistance at the cellular level. This means the body needs more insulin to do the same job. Elevated insulin increases inflammation and interferes with circulation, both of which directly affect the scalp and hair follicles. Hair follicles rely on a steady, calm metabolic environment. When insulin is high, the body shifts into storage and protection mode. Resources are redirected away from non-essential functions, and hair growth slows. This is why diets built around refined carbohydrates often correlate with thinning hair over time. The follicle receives mixed signals and growth becomes inconsistent. This is where food choices, especially at breakfast, become important. Starting the day with a meal high in protein and healthy fats helps keep insulin levels stable for hours. Eggs naturally fit into this pattern. They digest slowly, reduce the need for large insulin releases, and provide steady energy. This hormonal stability creates conditions that are more favorable for hair follicles to remain in the growth phase. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, adds another layer. Cortisol rises in response to physical stress, emotional stress, poor sleep, and blood sugar fluctuations. While cortisol is essential for survival, chronically elevated levels have a suppressive effect on hair growth. High cortisol pushes follicles into a resting or shedding phase and shortens the active growth cycle. What many people do not realize is that unstable blood sugar can drive cortisol higher. When glucose drops too low after a high carb meal, the body releases cortisol to raise it again. This repeated pattern keeps cortisol elevated throughout the day. Over time, the scalp becomes one of the areas affected by this hormonal stress. Eggs help indirectly by supporting blood sugar balance. A breakfast that includes protein and fat reduces sharp rises and falls in glucose, lowering the need for cortisol intervention. This calmer hormonal pattern reduces inflammatory signals around the follicle and supports more consistent growth. There is also a relationship between cholesterol and hormones that often gets overlooked. Cholesterol is the raw material from which many hormones are made, including those involved in stress regulation and tissue repair. When dietary cholesterol is excessively restricted, the body may struggle to maintain optimal hormone production. Egg yolks provide cholesterol in a natural form that the body can use as needed. This does not force hormone production, it supports balance. As people age, hormonal communication becomes less efficient. Signals that once worked smoothly may weaken, providing the body with stable energy, adequate protein, and healthy fats helps restore clearer signaling. Hair follicles respond to this clarity. When hormonal noise is reduced, growth cycles become more predictable. Another subtle factor is thyroid function. While not always clinically abnormal, thyroid activity often slows slightly with age. This affects metabolic speed at the cellular level, including in hair follicles. Stable insulin levels and adequate nutrient intake help support thyroid-related processes indirectly benefiting hair growth. What matters most is not one hormone in isolation, but the overall hormonal environment. Hair follicles thrive when the body feels safe, nourished, and stable. Daily habits shape that message. Meals that support steady energy, adequate sleep, and reduced stress signals gradually shift the internal balance. When hormonal stress decreases, the body becomes more willing to invest in maintenance functions like hair growth. This shift does not happen overnight, but it does happen with consistency. Over time, follicles that were once hesitant can enter a more active state when hormonal conditions improve and remain steady. What often makes the biggest difference in long-term health is not complexity, but clarity. The body responds best when it receives simple, consistent signals that its basic needs are being met. Hair follicles are no exception. When the body senses adequate nutrition, stable energy, and reduced stress, it becomes more willing to support functions that are not essential for immediate survival, including hair growth. A simple, nutrient-dense breakfast can quietly send that signal every single day. After 60, the body pays close attention to patterns. Irregular meals, skipped breakfasts, or sugar-heavy mornings create uncertainty at a metabolic level. In response, the body becomes cautious. It conserves resources and limits investment in repair and regeneration. Hair follicles interpret this as a reason to remain inactive. On the other hand, a steady morning routine that provides protein, healthy fats, and essential nutrients communicates reliability. Over time, that reliability changes how the body allocates resources. Breakfast plays a unique role because it sets the tone for the entire day. The first meal influences blood sugar, hormone release, and stress response for hours afterward. A balanced breakfast helps stabilize insulin and reduces the need for cortisol-driven energy corrections. This calmer internal state supports circulation, nutrient delivery, and cellular repair. Hair follicles benefit indirectly but meaningfully from this improved internal environment. Consistency matters more than quantity. The body does not respond dramatically to one good meal, but it responds steadily to repeated signals. When a nourishing breakfast becomes a daily habit, the body begins to anticipate support rather than scarcity. This anticipation is biological. It influences hormone rhythms, enzyme activity, and tissue repair priorities. Hair growth depends on this long-term sense of adequacy. Another important aspect is simplicity. Complicated routines often lead to inconsistency. A straightforward breakfast that is easy to prepare reduces decision fatigue and increases adherence. This is especially important as routines change later in life. When healthy choices feel manageable, they are more likely to be repeated. Repetition is what creates results at the tissue level. The body also responds to timing. Eating a balanced breakfast earlier in the day aligns with natural circadian rhythms. This supports better insulin sensitivity and more efficient nutrient use. Hair follicles, like other tissues, follow biological rhythms. Supporting these rhythms improves the efficiency of growth cycles and repair processes. There is also a psychological component that should not be overlooked. Taking care of oneself in a simple, deliberate way reinforces a sense of agency. This reduces stress and improves overall well-being. Lower stress levels translate into lower cortisol, which directly benefits hair growth cycles. Small daily acts of care accumulate into meaningful physiological changes. It is important to approach this process with patience. Hair grows slowly, and the signals that support growth need time to take effect. The absence of immediate change does not mean the effort is ineffective. It often means the body is rebuilding foundational processes before visible results appear. Trusting the process encourages consistency, which is essential for progress. Rather than focusing on loss, the emphasis shifts toward support. providing the body with what it needs day after day allows it to function as designed. Hair follicles are remarkably responsive when conditions improve. They do not require extreme interventions, only a stable environment that encourages growth rather than conservation. A simple breakfast becomes more than a meal. It becomes a daily message of nourishment and care. Over time, that message influences how the body prioritizes repair, maintenance, and regeneration. When practiced consistently, this approach supports not only hair health, but overall resilience and well-being. Supporting hair growth after 60 is a process that involves steady, intentional choices rather than quick fixes. The body operates on patterns and repeated signals, and hair follicles respond most effectively when they perceive stability and consistency. Every nutrient, every meal, every moment of reduced stress communicates to the body whether it is a safe time to invest in non-essential functions like hair growth. Over time, these small, repeated signals accumulate, and follicles that had slowed down or entered resting phases can begin to function more actively again. This process is gradual, but each day contributes to creating an environment where hair can thrive. Consistency in nutrition is one of the most powerful ways to support follicles. Providing protein, healthy fats, vitamins, and minerals in a balanced way ensures that the raw materials necessary for keratin production are always available. Protein supplies the amino acids required to build strong strands, while fat-soluble vitamins and minerals help regulate growth, strengthen the structure of the hair shaft, and support the scalp environment. When these nutrients are delivered reliably, the body interprets this as a signal that it can safely invest resources in hair rather than conserving them for more critical functions. Hormonal stability is closely linked to these nutritional patterns. Cortisol, insulin, and other hormones fluctuate in response to diet, stress, and sleep patterns. Chronically high or unstable hormone levels send signals that encourage follicles to enter rest or shedding phases. When meals are balanced, blood sugar is stabilized, and stress is managed, the hormonal environment shifts toward one that is supportive of growth. Hair follicles respond slowly but noticeably to these steady signals, often showing stronger growth over weeks and months of consistent care. Lifestyle factors also play a key role. Regular movement, adequate hydration, restorative sleep, and periods of relaxation all contribute to creating conditions that support follicle activity. Even moderate improvements in circulation and reduction in inflammation have tangible effects on hair growth. This is not about extreme interventions. It is about maintaining a body that is well supported, calm, and able to allocate resources effectively. Over time, the cumulative effect of these small adjustments can be significant. The psychological aspect of care is also important. Taking deliberate steps each day to nourish and support the body reinforces a sense of agency. Feeling in control of your routine reduces stress, which in turn reduces cortisol levels, creating a more favorable environment for hair follicles. Self-care is not simply a matter of aesthetics. It directly influences the biology that underlies hair growth. Consistency and patience in these habits allow the body to respond in a measurable way, even if results are not immediately visible. Repetition and pattern are critical. The body interprets repeated, reliable input as a signal of abundance. When hair follicles consistently receive nutrients, stable energy, and reduced stress signals, they gradually shift from a dormant or weakened state back toward active growth. This process is cumulative, meaning that each day of consistent care builds upon the previous one. Over weeks and months, new growth becomes stronger, strands become more resilient, and shedding often slows. Small, deliberate choices matter more than any single dramatic intervention. A balanced breakfast, consistent hydration, gentle physical activity, stress management, and reliable sleep form the foundation of support. The follicles respond not to sporadic efforts, but to the ongoing message of adequacy and stability. Hair health becomes an indicator of overall resilience, reflecting the steady investment in maintaining a well-supported body. Patience and persistence are essential. Hair grows slowly, and follicles take time to respond to improved conditions. Visible changes may not be immediate, but the biological processes underlying growth are active long before they are seen. Trusting this process encourages adherence and allows the body to rebuild foundational support for hair over time. Supporting hair growth after 60 is therefore a long-term, steady process. Every meal, every habit, every choice sends a signal to the body. Follicles respond to reliability, stability, and consistent support. Over time, this creates an internal environment where hair can regain strength, resilience, and growth potential, reflecting not just care for hair itself, but for overall health and well-being.